that you will introduce yourself, maybe where you're from and your connection to open mapping in the chat. And then one last point, at the end of the hour-long panel discussion, we'll have breakout rooms for 30 additional minutes, where you'll be able to enter a smaller room, unmute your microphone, and more participate in an active conversation with our speakers and with each other. For the hour-long panel session, though, we do ask that you enter any questions that you might want to ask the panelists into the written chat bar. So this page goes over a lot of what I just discussed. Just so you know, this webinar will be recorded. It's also going to be live streamed on YouTube. We do ask that you abide with the hot code of conduct. You can read the full conduct at the website listed on this page. The most important points are make sure that you are welcoming and respectful, be careful in your word phrasing and tone, and if we disagree on a topic, please try to understand why, and hopefully everyone is okay with this. And if you feel that you cannot abide by this code of conduct, we would respectfully ask you to leave. But I think should be good for everyone here. Okay. We also have a really exciting new offering on today's webinar, and that would be language interpreters. So you may switch to listen to the webinar in Spanish, French, or Portuguese. You'll find at the bottom of your Zoom screen a globe. If you click on that globe, you'll be able to select the language of your choice. This is a feature that we have tested out, but again, it's our first time using it with a live audience, so please be patient if there are any technical glitches with that piece. Here's some more information on how you can join us through the community working group. Several different links that you're able to click there. We'll also send these out in a follow-up email to you all in case you're not able to check out those websites right now. So I am now going to pass it over to our fantastic moderator. We're very, very lucky to be joined by Catherine D'Ignazio. She is the director of the Data and Feminism Lab at MIT and has done a lot of fantastic research and writing on the issues of sexism and misogyny in data. And so, Catherine, if you would just kindly introduce yourself, and then we'll move into introductions for the rest of the speakers. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Courtney. Such a pleasure to be here, and I'm really honored to be moderating this panel with these very esteemed guests that we have today to talk about mapping. Like Courtney said, I'm the director of the Data Plus Feminism Lab, and I'm a professor at MIT in the Urban Studies and Planning Department, where we do a lot of work with at the intersection of maps and justice, and all of our classes are actually based on OSM data. So we also teach students how to edit OSM and so on and so forth. So it's great to be contributing back into that community. So what I'm going to do now is I want to invite each of our guests to introduce themselves. Just a very brief introduction of who you are, where you are, what kind of work you do at the intersection of mapping and sexism, or mapping and gender and justice. And then we'll really kick into the panel. So maybe we'll start. Tshedy, do you want to kick us off with your introduction?
You're muted, Tshedy.
Sorry, I am Tshedy and a physical planner by profession working in the Ministry of Local Government. So basically, I started mapping from 2015, I think. And when Openstreetmap was introduced in Lesotho, the main idea was to help the planners to develop spatial plans because we had the GIS software that were out of date. So we got assistance from a council in Ireland called Fingal County Council. So that's how we started mapping. So mapping was just voluntary. We started adding data that we as planners thought would be useful to our work. So we started mapping the land uses, the services, the infrastructures, buildings, and all that. And I've been mapping since then till now, and I really enjoy mapping.
Thank you, Tshedy. How about Nathalie? Do you want to tell us a little bit about where you are and your involvement in the OSM community?
You're muted too, Nathalie.
Yeah, thank you, Nathalie. Yeah, thank you, everyone. I'm Nathalie Sidibe. I'm from Mali. I started Openstreetmap about 7 years ago, and I co-founded a Openstreetmap community in Mali. I'm also a humanitarian Openstreetmap former board member. Yeah, I'm happy to be part of this amazing panel. Thank you.
Fantastic. And so next, Celine.
Hi, everybody. I'm Celine Jacquin. I'm based in Mexico City. So my relationship with OpenStreetMap is that I'm an active member I have been active member for more or less 10 years now in humanitarian questions, but also in Mexico and Latin America. I'm a geographer and urban planner, so I always try to make the bridge between what I do and open data in general and geographic open data. And I am also co-founder of Geochicas, so the question of gender equality and women empowerment and women leadership is always a question important to me. I am also close to several open data, open code, open software communities in Mexico. So these questions are always in the center of the communities and of my work. Thank you. Thanks a lot for this space.
Thank you all. And so we'll just kick in. We got a number of super interesting questions submitted by folks online. So we'll just kick into the questions. And actually, Celine, let's stay with you to start. So I'll pass it to you to start, and then others can jump in after that. The first question is, why is it important to talk about sexism and misogyny in the open mapping ecosystem?
Yeah. So in general, so it's not a question of open data ecosystem. It's a question of society. So sexism and misogyny affects women involvement in general. So it affects all the dimension of the society. And when we talk about data, we talk about the main material for planning, for policies, for the knowledge about territory, and it affects everything, right? So we need to have diversity in the creation of data in general, and diversity is about also everything. But here we are talking about gender because it's one of the main issues in diversity, but not the only one. And when we don't allow women to feel safe, to feel invited, to join and feel welcome to join this type of space. So we can talk about OpenStreetMap, but we can also talk about any space related to open data, any profession related to data creation, data analysis, modeling, etc. We don't allow this sector to have a diverse vision, and so we won't have a data which is a reflect of the complete society, right? So we affect the results of the use of data, and we affect the place of women in general in the society. We don't allow to have women participating in professions, in engineering, in science, and we maintain a non-diverse society. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Yeah, you're focusing us, outside the open mapping ecosystem, because it's sort of much larger, of course, than just inside the mapping software or mapping data or anything like this. So maybe this is such a big, important question. I think everybody should answer it. So maybe Tshedy will go next to you. Why do you think it's important to talk about sexism and misogyny in the open mapping ecosystem?
Okay, thank you. I believe that we have to deal with sexism and misogyny, sorry, because if they are not dealt with, they will have problems, because the two words are present in all areas of our lives, and that creates the climate of intimidation and fear and insecurity. So you'll find that we'll have a biased data because most of the people want, especially women, want chip in and contribute. So I believe we have got to discuss the two, because again, I think it is believed that women are family keepers rather than technicians or whatever. So I think they have got to be empowered in the open mapping ecosystem and provide them with skills and ensure exposure so that they do the work. Also, I think women are capable of also contributing more, because they are the one, like we are saying, they are family keepers. So if they don't contribute, the information that we have will be withheld. That says our maps will be incomplete. Thank you.
It's a really important point. That actually reminds me of a great paper that was about OSM by Monica Stevens, the geographer, where she was pointing out that there were very few fine-grained distinctions for like daycare centers in OSM, but very many distinctions for like bars and things like this, which was partially this reflection of who the contributors were at the time. This is now like 5 years ago or something, but I think that's a really important point, that like we won't have all of the knowledge. We are basically missing these very important perspectives on the world, and without full inclusion. So next we'll turn to Nathalie for the same question. Nathalie, why do you think it's important to talk about sexism and misogyny in the open mapping ecosystem?
Yeah, thank you, Catherine. I think it's very important to talk about those issues, because it's one of the best way to help women who are facing them to officially share their experience. Otherwise, they won't talk about to anyone, and they will continue to be affected by those issues. So it's very important to talk about it, and this webinar is a big start to change things, I hope. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, all of you. Yeah, I think one of these things is thinking about how do we make these spaces to have conversations about this. So I think this is one of the great, first steps, is that we come together and name these forces and then start to figure out what to do about them. And so I'm gonna shift now to this. I'm gonna sort of combine a couple of the questions from the participatory questions. One of the questions is, how does sexism and misogyny show up in OSM and Wikipedia? But at the same time, I guess I want to talk about, like, how do we see it? How is it made manifest in the OSM community? But then how have you worked to challenge it at the same time? So I don't know if folks know, but the International Women's Day theme for this year is Choose to Challenge. And so that's one of the themes of our panel. So I think it would be helpful to kind of both talk about how do we see sexism showing up in the community, but then what are steps that you all have taken in your own work or with your own teams or in your own communities to challenge that or to push back against it or to make alternate contributions in other directions. So I think this one, maybe Nathalie, will stay with you now. So yeah, how do you see sexism showing up in the OSM community, and how do you push back?
Yeah, misogyny and sexism are reality in Openstreetmap space. And I have personally many experience since I start mapping in local level. I have many experiences. And I would like to say that I try to challenge things, but not alone, not alone. So I've always get support from men. Yeah, so men always stand with me whenever I'm facing whenever I'm facing those issues. So I think to challenge, to deal with sexism and misogyny, we need more. We need men. We need men to be with us. We need men to support us, to help us deal with misogyny. Yeah. So that's what we are doing here in Mali, and also we are, every time it's possible, we share our experiences with other people who are in need. Yeah. Thank you.
That's great. Yeah, and in a little bit, we have a question specifically about what do you think men should do to challenge sexism? And I think this is a great point to bring up. In Lauren Klein and I wrote this book called Data Feminism. And in this book, we make the point that it takes more than one gender to have gender inequality. And so we need more than one gender to fix gender inequality. So I think that's an important point of how we involve men as allies so that they can see their, we talk also about the concept of co-liberation. So how do we think about all of us are liberated when we've eliminated these oppressive forces? So what about you, Celine? How have you seen sexism showing up in the OSM community, and what are steps you've taken to either challenge it directly or indirectly in your work?
So sexism is not always very obvious, actually, but there are several grades, several levels of misogyny and sexism. Sometimes, but it's not so obvious, so common. You have insults, you have harassments. In general, it's more in private messages. It's common. Yeah, some women make testimonies about that, but there are more difficult way to detect sexism, and actually not everybody is aware about this type of sexism. So it's more about avoiding women expressions, women ID, women opinions, avoiding them, trolling them, minimizing them, or just not reading and not responding to them. You can see that in chats, you can see that in forums, but also in presential communities. So it's a more difficult dimension to deal with. And also, when little importance is given to works, to initiatives on gender equality, on inclusions in general. So it's not only again, it's not only towards women. It's about inclusion in general. So the difficulty is to talk about it and to give the place of this topic in general in the dialogue within our communities. And I think that the question with that is very slow. It's very difficult. So I don't have a very positive examples, but I can see that in a lot of communities, but more it's in small communities. Maybe it's more difficult in Openstreetmap because it's so wide, so it has a lot of inerties. But in smaller communities, you can see progress about it, talking about it, making dialogue, making rules for healthier conviviality. So where men are more and more involved, but it's slow. But any social changes are slow, so it's normal, and I think we go towards a good way.
Thanks, Celine. Yeah, it is so slow, isn't it? Yeah. But the fact that we keep talking is very important. So thank you. So Tshedy, what about yourself? So how do you see sexism showing up in the Openstreetmap community? And then what are steps or tactics that you take to get around it, to push through it, to fight it, and so on?
Okay. I think in my experience, mapping being the highest mapper in Lesotho, I got to have to answer a lot of questions as to how do I do it? Because like I said, women are in my country are considered as family keepers. You clean, you cook, you look after the kids if you have. And even growing up, that's how you were brought up, that growing up you have to do 1, 2, 3, and even more, but feminine related. So I think the kind of questions, where do you get all the time to do the mapping? And sometimes some people will tend to think you are ignoring your family or your kids or something like that. Or maybe if we used to have even the competitions and someone would say, okay, I think she's being favored in some way. She doesn't even deserve this. How does she do it? But I did have support from other males as well and females. And when I said sex, it's not like the negative messages were only from men. No, even some of the women didn't get it. But it happened, and I think there is hope. There is a high number of women now who are in the workforce, not like in the past, even though we still have that mindset as women and men of Lesotho. I think we are getting there as people, and I think now, even when we were mapping, I wasn't the only one who was mapping, and I wasn't the only woman who was in the lead of the hierarchy. So I think we changed that. We changed the mindset because most of us women in Lesotho were leaders in the mapping. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Yeah, like really taking the leadership opportunity. That's fantastic. Well, let's stay with you, Tshedy, because the next question relates to what you were just talking about in regards to the local and cultural context. So thinking about like how OSM is a global community. And so how are different communities and cultures presented with different kinds of gender discrimination and misogyny based on local culture? And I feel like that was starting to surface in some of your answer there, where you're talking about what are the stereotypes around what a good woman should be doing, where should a good woman's work be happening, and so on. And so how do you think about that, like sort of the situation in your country versus vis-a-vis like the broader OSM community? How do you reconcile those cultural differences?
I think in Lesotho, when it comes to Openstreetmap, we women kind of took the lead from the onset. So it's true we had the support for males and stuff, but we didn't let go and think, okay, we'll be women looking after our families or stuff. So I think we are winning, because most women in Lesotho played a huge role in Openstreetmap, and it also opened some of the opportunities for most women in Lesotho. I think we even got opportunities to even further our studies. And I think we were challenged because we see, okay, with Openstreetmap, we realized that there is more to it that we realized. And most women, I think I know of more than 5 who I worked with who furthered their studies because of Openstreetmap, because it opened our minds. Thank you.
That's so fabulous. That's a really impressive impact, actually, too, of that work. That's a really important impact. Yeah. I'm curious, Celine. So you're living in Mexico. You've lived in other places. What do you think about this question of local and cultural contexts around sort of gendered stereotypes and misogyny? How do you see this in the comparative context, and then how should it be addressed in a community that's global like OSM?
We can see different culture in the same country, in the same city, in the same community, local community. It depends on a lot of things. You can also see different cultures in professional sectors. So as an urban planner, I have worked a lot with public transport sectors, for example, which is very, very dominated by men. So you will see there a culture different of another culture, more about data analysis, which is also dominated by men, but a little less. And so all these diverse approaches and ideology can be seen in the same place, in the same table dialogue, etc. So it's not so much question of country where you can live. And I think that the good way to learn about it is to try to understand other people's codes and try to shorten the distance. In general, I think it's a good approach to have all the time. But it's also very difficult. Sometimes feminists say that we don't have time, we don't have the energy, we don't always have the energy to lead with that, and that's true. It's not because we want to raise awareness about something that we are all the time in this work of communication, of conviction, etc. So anyways, I think we have to try to do that when we can. Shorten the distance, try to understand other people's codes, try to put ourselves in others' shoes, right? And so a concrete example of that is trying to not use concepts. Feminisms use a lot of concepts, and I think it's not a good idea to communicate with others who are not convinced about our ideas. So with concepts, I think about mansplaining, manspreading, nerdsplaining, gaslighting, etc., etc. We don't always know what is that, and we just close the dialogue with others. We don't allow them to understand what we talk about and our ideas. So it's an example to put ourselves in other shoes. And also try to always make the dialogue in others level where they can understand. So if I work or if I participate in a very machist community, I will try to open some new ideas. And if I have success in that, in just creating a new idea or a new way to question things in life, in other people's, it's a success. So we have to try having little success one after another and progress slowly.
It's great. I think that's a very generous way to look at it, like a very generous way of sort of teaching, like using everyday life moments as teaching moments for people and meeting people where they are. I would just hope that the people that you're meeting understand the work that you're doing for them. You know what I'm saying? Because I think there's a really powerful educational labor that is happening there. Yeah, please.
If I can add something else, I think that a general idea that we have to spread is a responsibility in things in general, where when we express something with certain words, the responsibility of our behaviors in general in the society. So not only in gender equality's question, but in general. So this is I think a more acceptable idea and an easier idea to arise.
Great, thank you, Celine. And Nathalie, I'm going to also ask this question to you because the local cultural question is so important. I think we're all coming from these different places. So yeah, for you, how do you see the local cultural context of sort of gender equality in your country? And then in comparison with OSM as this global community, sort of how do you reconcile those two things? How do you think about those two things?
Thank you. Okay, here in Mali, due to culture and religious beliefs, sexism and misogyny are seen like things imported from Western countries. So it's very difficult to talk about those issues. And so women, even they are facing harassment, verbal assault, it's difficult for them to complain because those issues are not our culture according to religious leaders, according to our elders. Yeah, but more and more women got involved in organizations which promote gender equality, things like that. And we have also now a special minister which promotes gender equality in Mali. So we hope that things will change. Yeah, things will change as soon as possible. I think, I hope. Thank you.
That's challenging though. Yeah, that sounds challenging if gender equality is seen as not a local idea though. I can see how that'd be a really challenging environment to work in, and there would be a lot of resistance to using an imported idea from elsewhere.
Yeah, I would like to add the big challenge and also the opportunity for a global OSM community is maybe to come to a common understanding on sexism and misogyny. Yeah, this will help us to deal with those issues.
I really love that. I love that, putting that out there as an idea of sort of like what should the OSM community do to address these issues that are so pervasive. I mean, we've been talking about how it's not that it's unique to OSM, it's that OSM is a manifestation of the rest of the world where women face sexism and misogyny. So I love the suggestion that Nathalie just made that OSM could create a shared definition of what actually, what is sexism and misogyny, and maybe even it could like name certain behaviors or examples of like, this is sexist behavior or something. I'm going to take the moderator's privilege to just turn that into a question for the other two panelists. What do you all have ideas for what OSM could do in that same spirit? Or do you want to say that you think that's a good idea, what Nathalie just said? Or do you have other ideas for things that the OSM community could do as a group to sort of take action? Oh, and I'll say, Tshedy, why don't you start?
I think as a community, OSM should advocate for a council for women, equal participation for both men and women in the public face of OSM, and encourage maybe collaboration instead of competition. Because if we feel like we are competing, that's when you experience misogyny. So, and one important point to raise is that we should collaborate, and there should be that richness in the community and diversify. Thank you.
That's great. So thinking about ways that OSM can foster collaboration over competition. I think that's fantastic. So yeah, take it away, Celine.
Thank you. So I think that most of you as witnesses the situation in December in the Openstreetmap Foundation list, where some people, including me, including Geochicas, reacted, creating a statement. So through this statement, we asked the foundation to recognize the issue and to take actions. So in this moment, the local chapters and communities working group is working in some mechanisms to improve moderation models. So firstly at the foundation level. So sometimes in local communities we don't have so many relationship with the work done at the foundation level, but I think that it's a good idea to start at this level. Work on mechanism, work on code of conduct that can go to lower levels, where we can work on it, we can approve it, we can work in democratic ways on local versions. And all these actions can be or should be pretexts to talk about it, to have spaces for dialogues like this one today, but in any communities, in these ways to do things in its codes, etc., etc. So I think it's a very good step which is done this year. This work is slow because all of us are volunteers, but it's a good start, because I feel that a lot of open code, open data communities had a lot of progress that we don't really have in Openstreetmap. So it's time to change that, and we started to change it. And but it has to be a snowball. It's not just okay, we will make moderation models and code of conduct, and that's all. It's a pretext to talk, to think, to confront behaviors in our own communities.
Yeah, that's so important. Yeah, that the work is ongoing. It's not going to be fixed by a code of conduct or a simple tool or a checklist or something like this. I often think about it as it has to be such intentional and ongoing work, because like the water that we swim in is sexist, it is racist, it is, sort of anti low-income people. It's like, it's not inclusive in so many ways. And so when we have to fight against that. It's going to be the easiest thing to do will be to follow the status quo. And then the hardest thing to do is to always be putting in place processes to push back against status quo way of operating. So I think that's a great reminder. I want to turn now, we're getting some really great questions in the chat. And I want to ask Martin if he would feel comfortable to unmute and ask his question. Martin, are you there?
Yes, now I can unmute. Sorry about that. I was not able to. Yeah. So thanks for addressing my question. So I was wondering. So there's a lot of spaces in the OSM community, right? There's online spaces. There's in-person gatherings. There's a lot of different online spaces, instant messaging, forums, lists, etc. So, and I was wondering if the problems that we're discussing today are particularly pervasive in some of those spaces, right? Compared to others, if I can put it that way.
That's great. I don't know, maybe Nathalie, if you want to respond first. Yeah, is misogyny and discrimination, do we see it more in online spaces or offline gatherings or somewhere else?
Sorry, please, can you come on again? Catherine, can you come on again, please?
Sure. Yeah, I think Martin's question is, what are the spaces in OSM that are more sexist? So like, do you find more sexism in online interactions or offline, in-person gatherings? Assuming we can gather in person, which I don't know about you all, but in the US, we're still not gathering in person right now.
According to my personal experiences, I can say it's I witnesses misogyny or sexism in-person meetings, in interaction, not yet online or maybe, but right now only in interaction. Yeah.
What about you, Tshedy?
I haven't experienced it in online platforms, but also I can't say I've experienced it in gatherings. What I can say is what happens here in Lesotho, you would find that yes, there would be invite for people to participate. And like I said, women have always been taking the lead. So we would find that in the gatherings, there were always more females than males. It's just that from that, people won't admit that they were given chance to participate. It would be like favoritism was done for women to be there. That's all I can say. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Celine.
So that's very interesting because we could think that online spaces are more exposed, so people will control themselves more. So some way that's true. In the channels, people control themselves and more or less respect some implicit rules. But you can also see that it's a more traditional masculine space because it's about technology, it's about forums. So traditionally, for many decades, internet had these underground spaces populated by only men. So this profile of users or community participants sometimes emerge specifically when a conflict explodes. So it was the case with this statement we did in the community, in the global community in December. And you could see a level of violence and sexism you don't usually see in the channels. So that was a surprise for me, a real surprise. And I think that you have several type of communities within the communities. Some of them participate in the dialogue in a more regular basis, and they control themselves, or they are more aware about progressive ideologies, and others are totally not. So I would say that the sexism is more powerful, more present in online spaces.
It's so interesting that there's no unanimous answer to that. So I think that's telling too, is that it's happening in all of the places, like sort of online spaces, offline gatherings, and then just in sort of broader society. So that's really interesting. I want to invite Courtney, posted a really great question, or actually several questions in the chat. Courtney, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Absolutely. Thanks, Catherine. So what I wrote is, women nearly everywhere generally perform unpaid, invisible labor every day, such as caregiving and domestic tasks, much more so than men. A lot of open mapping and OSM labor is also unpaid. How can organizations and individuals who want to train and encourage women to map do so while ensuring the women themselves receive individual benefits? This could be payment or other benefits. How do we keep from further promoting unequal divisions of labor between genders while also ensuring women's perspectives are represented in OSM?
So maybe I'll pass back to Celine on this one. Celine, what do you think in relation to this question of unpaid labor, the gendered nature of it? Yeah, and how do we, I mean, I was very struck actually by Tshedy saying that the women who are in these leadership positions have really benefited from working with OSM. So that gave me some hope in terms of that even if that labor is unpaid, maybe there's this benefit that is derived. But what do you think about that, Celine? What do you think on this question of labor?
It's also a very interesting question. Thank you. When the pandemic started, it's funny because we thought that in Geochicas we would have a lot of time to do a lot of things because of home office and yeah, no space to do things outdoors, etc. And we saw all the contrary. And this question was very obvious as a question of the difficulty for women to deal with their different responsibilities in life. And it's also something we can see about sub-grants in general. It's common that sub-grants only cover expenses in projects, and this doesn't allow people, so poor people, but also women who generally are poorer than than men, because they have many responsibilities and for other people, and caring also involve costs. So it's a clear reality, and the engagement in volunteering, in volunteer activities, is more difficult for women. But they also needed some way to empower themselves, to learn, to gain in skills, professional skills, so to improve their personal and professional own development. So it's a sort of dilemma. It's a hard question, but I would say that the way to work on that or solution is to always make available activities for women, to help them to integrate these activities, being welcoming, being very executive, and in our way to communicate, executive in the activities, and not losing time because they have less time than men. And be more concrete in what we do, concrete, to save time and to improve their capacity to learn. So, and also being very sensible, about the hours in the day to have activities, and to understand if they can't. So sometimes people want to integrate more women, but don't have much patience when women say that they can't be there. So do you want to be there, or don't you want to be there? But we have to make space for them and understand if they can't, and always still invite them. So that's the point, I think.
Nathalie or Tshedy, do you want to respond to this question too? Do you have anything to add here? Yeah, Nathalie, go ahead.
Yeah, it's it's a great idea to engage more women in mapping, but it's not so easy depending on reality in each country. In Mali, it's not so easy even for some men to engage in volunteer activities. So what we do here for women is we try to engage women who are already involved in other organizations, and also we engage women who are studying geography, computer science, and yeah, things like that. So it's easy to engage them as they have they are in need. For example, for students, for women who are studying, they are in need of data. So we try, we train them, we learn them how to use Openstreetmap tools and how they can empower themselves today and tomorrow. Yeah. Thank you.
That's fantastic. Yeah, what about you, Tshedy? I think that this is very interesting of like, how do we involve women, but while also being sensitive to the constraints on their time and participation?
Okay, I think, first of all, we have got to be flexible and try to understand what works for them, even though it won't work for everybody. Maybe try to slot times depending on what suits who. But what I also found interesting that could make OSM work is to involve the youth mappers in the universities, because they don't have much responsibilities as women with families. I have seen in other countries, we don't have the youth mappers in Lesotho, but I so wish we could, because in other countries, I saw that even young women in universities are taking the lead, and they are. So I think it's what can work to be able to involve more women. We've got to go to the universities and train them from that age, and I think that could work. Yeah, thank you.
Fantastic. We're almost coming to the top of the hour. Yeah, we have only 5 minutes. One quick question, because it's coming up a lot in the chat. People are very curious what you all think about a code of conduct, and whether a code of conduct would be helpful at the level of the OSM Foundation, or potentially smaller events, or I guess the software platform too, or sort of, I mean, maybe there's an implied question of like, if there's a code of conduct, to which level should it be applied to? And so maybe I'll start with Celine here, because I know you all have done some work on this previously.
Thank you. I don't have much experience on that, but I think it's definitely something we have to work on. We are working on, and because it was a regular comment in the channels after the statement, where people opposed very strongly about it, because it's like it would mean the end of freedom and the control everywhere, and all of this. I would just like to say that code of conducts and rules, we can just call that rules for conviviality, have always existed in all type of communities and in all human societies. So it's not something weird. It's not something wrong. It's just something that help people to live together. So it's just natural for any society, any group. And I definitely think that we need it. We need strong code of conduct, but also a code of conduct is flexible. So it's strong, but because it has very specific ideas and specific codes, but it also allows dialogue, permanent dialogue, and the moderation is there for that. So we have to do this, and we have to do this in any kind of space. So it can be for a whole community, like a global OpenStreetMap, local OpenStreetMaps, but also for just a webinar. Just a presentation, a conference. I have seen in very little groups of conversations, like five people dialoguing on anything, making some rules at the beginning, like please don't take the voice for more than 10 minutes because we only have 2 hours and we want everybody to be able to take the voice. Please help somebody who hasn't take the voice to explain his or her ideas if she wants, etc. And yes, thank you.
Thank you so much. We're really coming up on time, but I want to end on a positive note. So maybe we'll go and each person can say one sentence for something that gives you hope about achieving gender equality in open mapping, but also just in the world generally. So one hopeful thing. Maybe we'll start with Nathalie.
Yeah, thank you. I would like to say something about the code of conduct. I think it's a good thing to have a strong code of conduct, but we have to know that a code of conduct can only change behavior. But we need something else. We need movements. We need a lot of campaign for changing cultural view and belief on sexism and misogyny. Yeah. So I'm very hopeful because I say that this webinar is a great start to talk about misogyny officially with men, with everyone, is a good thing. So I'm very hopeful. Things will change, I'm sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Tshedy, what about you?
Should I say something about code of conduct or the question?
If you have something to say, that's great. Yeah. Feel free to respond to either one of those or both.
Okay. No, I won't say anything about the code of conduct, really. I'll move on to the next one. You said we should say one strong word sentence. Okay. I think as a community, we need each other. There shouldn't be a superior gender. For the completeness of our maps, we need men and women to contribute, and we need to support each other. I think I said this before. It's not the women's world. It's not the men's world. It's our world. And for it to be complete, we need each other. Thank you.
It's fantastic. Celine, maybe want to leave us with one thing that gives you hope.
Yes, I would like to say that I agree with Nathalie that each step is only a step, and the code of conduct is just a tool. And we can think about other tools which are in turn pretext for talking about dialoguing with our communities. So all of these things are a permanent path, and we are all in this path. And so this is what gives me hope. We are working in this path of diversity and inclusion, and it's just a question to be part of this work. There is no best way to be in this path, but just walking in this path. Thank you.
Thanks. Those are some fantastic statements to leave us with. Thank you all. And now I think the facilitators are going to help put us into breakout rooms so we can have a more intimate conversation.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you so much, Catherine. I'm just going to briefly share my screen with you all. And if you are able to stay on the webinar for up to 30 more minutes, we're going to be hosting these breakout rooms. You're able to select which room you are planning to join. So just for your reference, these are the different rooms, which panelists will be in each room. I know that all the rooms will be wonderful. So wherever you end up, it's going to be fantastic. Here is a link. We'd love, love, love to have your feedback. We'll also send this in a follow-up email. So please, please just take a few minutes to fill that out. And then another quick reminder to join our working group. You can help plan webinars like this or engage in a lot of the different activities that we manage. You can also reach out to myself or anyone on the hot staff if you want more information about that. So with that said, if we could start the breakout rooms, that would be wonderful.
The